A story where, something you did changed the trajectory of the company, or an interesting take when you were, working with a client and there was the brainstorm moment that clicked, that was the birth of that campaign that was successful.
What I have found is that PR is actually much, much more simple than it is complex. And what you're asking and what you're sort of inferring is that there's a mystery to it.
How much of that is actually thought out and steering the consumer versus taking the data of what you're getting?
When we would look at it, when I would look at a new client or a prospect and look and see what they had to say now and what they had to say, but we would always look beyond that, but not very far, because, and first of all, every client is an individual. It's not going to fit everyone the exact same way.
Overall, publicity versus PR, is there a difference, and what are those key differences without going way deep into it?
Well, I'm not sure there's a difference between PR and publicity. I look at PR as an umbrella term. Publicity is one part of PR. Crisis management may be one part of PR. Event production may be one part of PR. Reputation management may be one part of PR. And all of them may eventually tap into the use of publicity to execute what those other parts.
Are you looking for actionable insights from the world's most inspiring individuals? The Built by Love podcast is on a mission to transform your life, your business, and your health. Tune in for impactful conversations with people who do business differently. Avoid burnout, acquire freedom, and live life fully on your own terms. With me, your host, Daniel Bussius, alongside my co-host, Richard Varga. Dick Grove, is an absolute pleasure and an honor to have you on the Built by Love podcast. Thank you, sir, for your time on the show today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I appreciate the opportunity to talk.
Absolutely. So our listeners are going to get to know a little bit about you, your background, and why we have you on the show, because arguably you're one of the best PR and publicity experts out there, in which we'll get into. But before we do, is there a high stakes story or a time that you're in a boardroom or pitching a client that you'd like to bring us into, so we can kind of shadow how that experience unfolded?
You mean inside the pitch into the client themselves? Is that what you're looking for there?
A story where, something you did changed the trajectory of the company, or an interesting take when you were, working with a client and there was the brainstorm moment that clicked, that was the birth of that campaign that was successful. Most people, including me selfishly, don't know what happens kind of behind the curtain, right? You always see the end product of what comes out of PR publicity, usually for, the Fortune 100 brands. And so if you can kind of take us into a moment of what something like that looks like, and from your firsthand experience, that would be incredible.
Well, actually, what I have always found, and I've been in this business a very long time, what I have found is that PR is actually much, much more simple than it is complex. And what you're asking and what you're sort of inferring is that there's a mystery to it. And take us behind the curtain and show us how the mystery unfolds and how you go about doing it. To me, that's not it. PR is, I had a professor years ago tell me, PR is pretty simple. He described it as performance recognized. So that's really what it is. But what's really key in building a PR campaign for somebody is, one, you have to respect the fact that what you're doing in PR, and by the way, I've been part of what I refer to as the publicity end of PR. My job has always been, how do you go about getting stories in the media, positive stories about your client? So, and to work with the other elements of marketing, the marketing mix themselves, advertising, digital marketing, now social media, and so forth. And PR plays a role within that. It's not a magic elixir to suddenly have everything go right for a company when you've done that. What I like to do is think that we're a part of it, but we're a rather unique PR is a rather unique part of what you're doing in a marketing campaign. And basically, it has to do with where my area has always been, guys, has been, again, publicity. How do you generate positive publicity for a client? And that's very, very simple. There's nothing very complex about it. It's what is the news value of what that client is trying to say? It's not a matter of puffery or anything else. And it's often said in PR, inform, don't promote. Well, too much of PR has been given the label of being a promotional vehicle as opposed to an informational vehicle. Good PR, publicity, public relations in the classic form. And I'm not talking about crisis communications. I'm not talking about event production. I'm talking about good old earned media publicity. And when you stick to that area, which has been most of my life, and I certainly have done the other things as well, but the key thing of publicity, of earned media, and when you go into that back room where the guys are sitting around or the women and sitting around trying to figure out what to do, it comes down to a very simple thing. What are you trying to say about your client, your product, your cause? And where is the news value in what you're trying to say? Good PR people, good publicists know that their job is to find that kernel of news that makes it important to the media. I've also said years for over the years and wrote a book about it, as a matter of fact, a few years ago, called It's the Media, Stupid. And what that really meant was that all good publicity comes down to what the media can use and what the media needs to fulfill their needs, not the clients. That's blasphemous in this business. But so what we would do is we would sit down and we'd say, what is the news value in what you're trying to promote or say, and so forth. And if it's not apparent, we had various ways to go about finding that news value, digging it out, finding it. And there's about a 10-point system that I used to go through with clients, which said, okay, we'd ask them questions to find out where is the news value in what you're trying to say. But I'm getting back to your original comment and your original question. It's not pulling back the curtains and finding what sort of mystery things that a bunch of people sitting around the table are coming up with that are going to suddenly make you look like you're worth $1 million when you're really only worth 10 cents. It's really, what can we say about you that, one, it has to be true, obviously, very, very important, okay? And where is the news value in what you're trying to say? Because what we're going to try and do with earned media, I use the term earned media, meaning you have to earn that. You have to earn the media's respect and interest. And that's really what we mean by earned media, as opposed to paid media, where you simply pay a certain amount of dollars and you get to pick where you're going to be, you get to pick to what you're going to say, and so forth. But with earned media, you've got to look and dig and deep and find out what is it the media wants, what do they need. And even if you want to get a little bit mysterious, you have to look and also and see who you're pitching to. Who is that reporter? Who is that editor? Who is that source that you're pitching it to? And you find out more about them. Dig a little deeper. What have they written about? What are their interests? Because also, always remember when you're pitching to another human being, and that human being probably has a boss in the media, and that boss has a concern over whether that person that works for them is going to be delivering stories that are going to hold their overall audience. So I've often said to people that look first at the reporter and the media and find out what they're interested in and what they need, and then look above them and say, what's going to make sure that you're making that person that you're pitching to a hero with their boss. So if the complexity comes in, it's a bit in the psychology or the human interest behind it. But the basic purpose of PR is to develop a story, and a story that is going to have newsworthiness to the media, so they'll grab a hold of it and say, you know what? Because remember, there's another thing. The media gets pitches. I mean, we used to say, I'm not sure what the number is today, but the Wall Street Journal probably got 100,000 pitches a week.
Wow.
And so, how do you, that means 100,000 different little PR people are trying to invade that space and say, here's why my particular client is newsworthy of your space for you to cover. And when you do that, when you look at that, you realize, my God, what is it? What is that one thing that's going to make that person, that reporter, that editor say, you know what? I'd like to learn more about this. You're never going to get them the full story, but you'd like to learn more about this. How do you go to that next step with the media? And when you've got 999,000 competitors trying to do the same thing. And so what I've always tried to do with my people and my clients is I want to dig deep to find out what are those, we want to find out those little interesting things that's going to spark that reporter to say, that's interesting. I'd like to learn more about that. You don't necessarily get that, and I'm sure we can talk about it over a period of this podcast about press releases and so forth.
Yeah.
I have, in fact, I'll just tell you right now, I have little or no use for press releases
Okay.
my entire career. Okay. I've often said to clients, I'll be glad to do a press release for you. Do I know how to write a press release? Sure. Did I learn how to do the inverted pyramid and the and Associated Press handbook and all of that? Of course. But press releases should be only as an announcement of something. They're not necessarily anything that's going to be in particular. Oh my God, trying to put out a press release that and think that's going to just be run as it is. Maybe if you're the president of the United States or you're the president of God only knows, or a celebrity of some kind, and you make an announcement about something, but maybe that will be carried exactly it is because, frankly, the reporter and the media has little access to that person to find out the real behind the scenes story of the story. But press releases in general are a waste of time. And I used to say, save a tree, don't write a press release. But think of create a story that is going to have a beginning and end. It's going to have protagonists. It's going to have antagonists. It's going to be basically something that is going to be a tale that this company wants to convey, and the media will carry forth to their audience, which is the ultimate place where the company or the client wants to talk to. So
I want to get more about that a little later. You mentioned a couple things. You mentioned, paid media, earned media. You mentioned publicity. You mentioned traditional PR. And I know at least for the last few decades that I've talked to clients, unless they've actually got experience in PR or publicity, no one really actually understands the difference. So can you kind of highlight like what and I know there's lots of nuances, right? There's like the special categories of crisis PR and so forth, but like overall publicity versus PR, like is there a difference and what are those key differences without going like way deep into it?
well, I'm not sure there's a difference between PR and publicity. PR, I look at PR as an umbrella term. Publicity is one part of PR.
Okay.
Crisis management may be one part of PR. Event production may be one part of PR. Reputation management may be one part of PR. And all of them may eventually tap into the use of publicity to execute what those other parts. But nevertheless, it's it's almost like there's a quiver and a bunch of arrows in it, and the quiver is PR, and which tool do you want to pull out to use? I happen to think publicity really is defined in my terminology as earned media. It's not. It's media that has it's stories that you have to earn the right with the media in order to get them published or told or broadcast or even on a podcast. Somebody had to interest you in the fact that I was going to be interesting enough to talk to waste your time of your podcast on me.
Your team did a great job, by the way.
over yet. That the jury's out, but that's the point. Is that we've had to earn that interest, and therefore, if it's published and shows up, then it's earned. Paid media is very clearly advertising. That's all it is. Now,
Mm.
remember, gentlemen, and you probably know from your research that I spent 30 years running a company and developed a process called pay for performance. So I was definitely an outlier in the world of PR, even though I began my career in very much in traditional PR firms and so forth. But pay for performance was a way of getting earned media for clients, but having them pay only if we actually succeeded in landing. If we actually landed a story in the Wall Street Journal for a client, they didn't pay until we actually landed that story. That's much different than hourly fees or retainers and so on. By the way, I'm not knocking those others, but I always thought it was my experience in coming out of big agencies and working for big clients was there was a lot of creativity when it came to hourly fees.
Yeah.
I used to
That's diplomatic.
So, so I always believed that it was a fair way to do it. It's not necessarily a great business model, and a lot of people would look at it like, "Are you nuts?" You know.
Yeah.
And I've had debates. Oh my God, over the years with PRSA and so forth, I used to claim that I was charging only if I was charging that I was guaranteeing coverage. And I wasn't guaranteeing coverage. In fact, just the opposite. When you worked it my way, you were not guaranteeing coverage. In fact, you were out there on a limb because you were much like a contingency paid attorney. You're putting in all the work and effort, and it's your money that's backing it up.
Yeah.
And only then, if you actually win the case, or in our case, if we actually got a story published, broadcast, etc., only then did we get paid for it. We got paid substantially, yes, but the point was that I thought that was a much fairer way to do it, and so I built a model around that over the years. So, so in my case, all I'm saying is earned media had a very particular definition. We earned that. And that was the difference. Did we ever work on fees or hourly fees or a retainer? Sure. And there were cases where where something is going to be time intensive and it doesn't have a tangible thing like a published article that you could charge for. So yes, we did. And I always believe, and I always thought it was kind of interesting, the debate with me often was, well, Dick, what about all those hours that are put into developing relationships with the media? And you get a lot of that saying, oh my God, and you've worked out the strategy with the client. Shouldn't you be paid for that? Well, if the ultimate goal is coverage, is media coverage, i.e. publicity, if that's the ultimate goal, then why not charge that and put and earn it by you invest in your strategy, you invest in the time and the research and so forth, and then charge accordingly on the other end. It was a different model, but nevertheless, it was something that worked quite effectively for 30 years with many, many great clients.
You didn't start your business to be a full-time marketer. You started it to take control of your future and live life on your own terms, to earn abundantly, and to make a positive impact in this world. But somewhere along the way, funnels, lead magnets, landing pages, and email sequences became your second job. At Built by Love Agency, we get it, and we've got you. We specialize in done-for-you marketing that speaks your brand, sells your services, and brings in your dream clients without you lifting a finger. Whether you're ready to scale or just tired of duct taping your marketing together, it's time to hand it over to the pros. We've been in business since 1998 and have worked with over 1,000 brands, ranging from Fortune 500 companies to small businesses with visions to change the world. Our experience in what we do runs deep, and our multiple awards, accolades, and decades of happy clients shows what we do for our clients works. Visit BuiltByLove.com today to schedule your discovery call so you can get back to doing the work you love. An agency you'll love, results you'll love even more. BuiltByLove.com.
Going back, I guess what I'm saying is that there are various elements, and publicity is one element of the PR toolbox, all of which can be used and should be used. And PR itself is one element of the marketing toolbox. So it's goes, you stretch it out. Now, a good PR campaign, a good publicity campaign is part of an overall campaign, and a good part of an overall marketing campaign. I've had clients, many clients over the years, who have come and said, all I want is a story in the Wall Street Journal. Can you get that for me? I'd say, first of all, I have no idea whether I can get it for you. I can only know once I hear what you're trying to say and what the story is, and then I can determine whether there's a chance I could get it for you. I can't guarantee it. Because again, there's 99,000 others that are trying to get into that same story. But I have always thought is that you really should be thinking in terms of a campaign. And the campaign to me is when you've integrated the other resources, the other marketing resources. Nothing is going to be stronger. And PR and publicity, part of PR, is an element within that. And the best are the ones that are fit within an overall campaign. Yes, there's advertising, because advertising can be very effective in terms of what you're trying to do, in terms of announcements and getting certain things out. You can, email campaigns and so forth can be very effective in terms of things. But then you add in the element of earned media, and where earned media is so special and why it's worth that extra premium that I used to charge. Why it's so special is that it's a third party saying nice things about you. It's not you saying nice things about yourself, okay? That third party is the media. That third party is the Wall Street Journal carrying a story. And most people feel there's credibility with the media. I know it sounds funny in today's world, news and all that crap, but most people still inadvertently or even subconsciously, if something shows up in a paper, they have a tendency to believe that it's true.
Yeah.
And so therefore you've got a third party credibility going with earned media, with publicity. And that's where the premium comes. That's why it's something that's even more special in many ways than advertising. Now, it works well with advertising, but its value goes beyond that, because it's a way of saying somebody else is saying really great things about what my cause is, what my product is, and so on. And that's where the real value comes. And also with PR, it has I don't know what the term would be. It has a very long tail. PR is not something that just shows up in a magazine on the doctor's credenza, an article. What it is, it's something that, and particularly in today's world, it can be merchandised, it can be sent out, it can be used as what we now call in our profession, you're creating content. And that content is third-party credibility content that therefore can be used in your marketing efforts way beyond that original story that showed up on CNN or on in the Wall Street Journal or New York Times or the Paducah Herald. You, as a smart, and we're a good PR person and a good marketing person, which they should be, inform the client, teach the client, educate the client to take that piece of earned media and merchandise it way beyond what that one little story that appeared in the whatever it was in the doctor's office on the coming through it.
Is there like an ideal customer or business that should start to entertain the idea of PR? I know, like, outside of this podcast in my digital marketing agency, the standard is always the same thing. We want more leads, we want more customers, and we want more sales. And so the quickest lever usually is paid traffic, right? Turn on ads, and we can adjust very quickly. And then, as you kind of mentioned, this is where I'm getting to it, like more long tail things that are going to take more time. And that's like developing the relationships and so forth with those leads that come in and so forth. So this is going to be a two-part question. The first is really who is, and I know it's a broad question, by the way, who's good for PR? Like, who would be a good candidate for PR? And I guess the second part to the question we can tackle one by one is, at what juncture should an entrepreneur, business owner entertain or start to seriously consider using PR? Again, broadly PR, publicity, the whole,
Well, if they have a story to tell, or if they feel they have a story to tell. Many clients don't have a story to tell, but they believe they have a story to tell. And what the job of the PR person is to dig a little bit and hunt and come up with that story, even in or enlarge that story that the client thought they had in order to make it again palatable and interesting to the media. So one of the things I always look at, and we always looked at in terms of clients, was where's the story? What are they trying to do? Are they an interesting company? And what we used to do is spend a lot of time digging and hunting, not just on. And I used to tell clients this: you've got, first of all, you want to tell your story. What is that story? That's the thing you write down right away. Okay, but what's behind that story? Are there interesting things the way you run your company? Are there interesting things that you do that are in the way you manufacture your product? Are there interesting things that you do in the way of your hiring practices for your company? Is there a human interest element with time? Do you create data, for example, in your everyday operation? The media loves data, because what I'm talking about is not just one story. And I, it sounds silly to say I don't want a client that has one good story. Of course you do. But what you really want, if you want to have longevity with a client, is you look beyond that initial thing that they've come to you and you see, is there something bigger here? Is there something that we can turn into a constant influx of media interest for this company or this person beyond what they've come up with themselves? Because I just invented the world's greatest mousetrap or widget or piece of software. Great, wonderful. We'll see what we can do to get that out there in the media and so on and so forth. Beyond that, that's what I always got the greatest kick out of, and the challenge was digging deeper into a company, finding out who they are, what they made, where they came from, do they create? And like I said, there are things, because we became media experts. That's what I consider myself more than anything, in terms of what the media wants and what the media needs to do their job. And you come up with those answers, then you've got something that really is special. So when we look at our first client and what the kind of companies we are, I look for companies that are interesting, but I've also found clients that are boring as hell. Okay. I mean, there are software companies, there are accounting firms, there are law firms, there are there are a lot of different kinds of companies or clients that are just boring, just truthfully boring. So you got to dig and just say, well, boy, but somehow they've been successful. And you're right. I mean, I'm not, and by the way, we've worked with a lot of startups over the years, I have, but I've also worked with a lot of established companies. I find both fascinating, because established companies, I know what it takes to keep a company going for 30 years and to grow a company. And there's a story there. There's probably a story there. So if I sound a little corny, and when I used to say, I believe there's a story around every corner, I actually do believe that. I love learning about new companies, learning about people that have interesting backgrounds or what they're doing now or the challenges they face on every day. And we've turned that over the years. One of the things I'm most proud of is taking those kind of things where the client didn't realize and turning that into a campaign over a long period of time that sustained constant attention, positive attention on that client.
I have a question on that, Dick. If on that process, because I've kind of noticed this a couple times. Sometimes a product will be released, and there's sort of a campaign around it which gets your attention, and then I've noticed over time it starts to change. And I'm curious, just because you've been under the hood or behind the curtain on this, is oftentimes this thought out as a 1, 2, 5-year campaign of whatever it might be, and it's sort of like backward engineered to get as much attention at the outset and then refine it to a different point? Or do you find that you start parsing the data as it comes in, you're seeing where people are resonating, and you start tailoring the message. I guess if I were to sum it up, I'm curious how much of that is actually thought out and steering the consumer versus taking the data of what you're getting and adjusting it accordingly.
Interesting question, but your comment about steering the consumer, I can't imagine ever steering a consumer. You find somebody that says, I can steer a consumer to do certain things and so forth, I'd have them become the next, I don't know, health secretary, I think. And you probably get my politics leaking into this conversation a little bit. But I think that's so much bullshit. Uh, you don't, you can't. Okay. Now, what we do, and it's an interesting question because when we would look at, and when I would look at a new client or a prospect and look and see what they had to say now and what they had to say, but we would always look beyond that, but not very far. Okay. Because, and first of all, every client is an individual, absolutely an individual. So it's not going to fit for everyone in the exact same way. But you look and see what it is they're trying to sell, do now, and you want to maximize that. Yes, but you are automatically, if you're interested in having a relationship with the client, and you find the client interesting enough, and by God, it'd be a good idea. It's not always a thing of desperation. Sometimes you actually plan on, and sometimes you'll actually reject a client for a lot of reasons. You'll reject a client. It could be the kind of product they're producing and so forth, or it could be the people involved. But when you see a client that you think, I'd really like to work with these guys, first of all, I like them. Secondly, I like what they're doing. I like what they've done. And I can see that there's going to be a long-term thing here because they've got just enough things going that you can dig and hunt a little bit more and find something that will last. But I don't think anybody, at least I never did, we never looked at a client as a 5-year client or a 3-year client. We looked as a client that had something really interesting to say now and deep enough to say, I think we can keep this going because they've got the other elements that really can make this thing work. One, they're good, innovative people that are working for this company. Secondly, they've got an attitude of innovation about them, an attitude of customer concern, which is very important. The company's not going to stay in business very long if they're just trying to sell something quick and then move on. So you look at all those things. You also look at it very much, and from my standpoint, from a storytelling standpoint. And how long do you think they have? Do they have enough stories? And do you think we can find new stories? And do you think? And look, we're in a business too, and I've always said that. Do they have the finances to sustain a long-term relationship? And you've got to take that into effect. And many PR firms don't, believe me. They just want to grab the money and get and get out.
Yeah.
We'll get you a few things, and then you're on your own. And that's nothing I've ever wanted to do. So I don't know if I answered your question, but it's we do and we don't look long term at a client.
Is there?
Yeah, you mentioned. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Dan. There's a quick aside there because you mentioned knowing the people involved and rich stories that come out, and I think you do have a funny story about an early client that was with a contact lens company. Would you care to tell us a bit about that?
I always answered that. I always asked when we had our first, what we called orientation meeting, meaning that first meeting you have with the client, and at the end of that. Those sessions, I would always ask the question, are there any skeletons in the closet that we should know about? Because the media is going to find out about it. You can bet on it, okay? Soon as we start raising your profile, they're going to find out about it. So any skeletons in your closet? Well, that actually was created originally by a contact lens company, and it's true. It's a mail order contact lens company. It's still in business, but we were at the meeting, and there were 3 or 4 of my people, and we're sitting around with the 2 heads of the CEO of the company and so forth around the table. And I asked a similar question to that at the end of the day. And one of the guys looked at the other guy and said, "Should we tell him about our founders?" And we both looked at each other and said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, our company is actually funded on drug money. They're both in jail, but it was originally funded by drug money running in through Florida. And so, do you think now they're in jail? So would that still be something you would find out about?" And we looked at each other and said, "Yes." I'm going to find out about it. Now, can we handle
That's
that?
hilarious.
If believe it or not, if you're upfront about it and get it out of the way, maybe the customer will overcome that worry. If the product is so cool or so cheap or so available, in those cases it was all 3 of those. So we actually kept the client. But I always make that point that from now on we always ask that question, and you try and ask it early, not at the moment that you're starting to work with somebody. And yeah, no, we've had
A lot of investment.
one of our great clients over the years, and I won't go into too much detail because it was a company that had what was referred to as a cure for erectile dysfunction, ED. That was before Viagra. That's how long ago this client was. Okay. And they got a hold of us and they said they'd like to get publicity on their particular product. It happened to be a vacuum pump. I won't go into too much more detail, but we said, okay, and we talked to them and so forth. Honest to God, they had the greatest backstory I've ever heard. I mean, it was truly a wonderful backstory about how this product came about and was invented and so forth and founded. We took the business, but it was one of those stories where, and we were very proud of one thing, and this is a good example. There's a point to this story beyond that. When you're talking about erectile dysfunction, you're not, and in the days of pre-Viagra, we're talking about mid-90s now. And at the time, we could not get anybody in the main media to carry a story on this product, even though, and I'm being honest, 30 million men suffered from it, okay? It was a major health problem, but it was not talked about, okay? And certainly solutions weren't talked about. And so we were going crazy. We could not get the main media to do a story. And then we studied. You were talking about backroom kind of thing. We did sit around the table, and we said, why is this not resonating with the media? And one of the reasons it wasn't resonating with the media, that almost all the reporters we were going to with this story in the major media, okay, were male. Males did not want to talk about it. They didn't want anything to do with this story. We said, you know what? Let's find female reporters. Let's change our pitch on this to that it's not just a male problem, it's a female problem. If 30 million men are suffering from it, 30 million women are suffering from it. We'd say partners,
That's
nevertheless.
a good approach.
So we started pitching female reporters, and we started getting through. And we also turned it into, we said, what else could we be doing to get this story covered? And we said, you know what else it is? It's a marketing story. Here's a company that has a product that solves a health problem, a major health problem, and the media will not do anything about it. That became a story in itself. We pitched the media on a story about how you're not caring. And we're very proud of the fact, we were very proud of the fact that for the first time ever, we think, there's no way of proving this, by the way, but we think we were the first client, let's put it that way, that we were able to get the Wall Street Journal to actually use the term penis printed in the story. We said, that's a breakthrough. But you get the idea. There was a way, we came up with a way, an angle that was different because we weren't getting through, because the media wasn't, and it goes back to what The media is the vehicle. You've got to be able to understand the media because they're the vehicle that are going to carry that story. Guys, I own and I owned that company for almost 35 years. So I got a million of those stories, if you can imagine.
Has with internet, social media, and obviously TikTok and all the other things, has the way that you're pitching or the types of stories changed for getting publicity?
You don't have a marketing problem. You have a connection problem. In today's crowded, noisy marketplace, your competitors are spending more, shouting louder, and chasing every new trend. But deep down, you know that's not the answer. Because real growth, the kind that lasts, comes from something deeper. It comes from love. Marketing Built by Love reveals the hidden engine behind the world's most successful brands. Genuine human connection. This isn't theory. It's the same science-backed framework used by billion-dollar companies to earn trust, spark loyalty, and turn passive customers into passionate brand advocates. And now, it's available to you. Whether you're a startup founder, solo entrepreneur, or seasoned business leader, if you're tired of superficial strategies that burn out fast and want to build something meaningful, this book is your blueprint. The future of marketing is human connection, not hype. Get your copy of Marketing Built by Love today at Target.com, any Barnes & Noble store, Amazon.com, or wherever you buy quality books. Because love scales, and your brand deserves to grow.
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, it's got compressed over the years. So what used to be, you could send out you could, God forbid, you could actually make a phone call and talk to a reporter. You can't do that anymore. But you could also send out a paragraph, a pitch that was a paragraph long or something. Really do, and then as both two things happened. One, the media became compressed. I mean, all of the newspapers that went away, all of the news staffs that went away and got compressed and so forth within the deal. And then the media itself changed and so on. So how do you get to them? And so, yeah, it has had changed dramatically. I mean, every pitch now. In fact, I just talking to a reporter this week on a new company, a podcast that I've started and so forth. And it's interesting because doesn't take phone calls, doesn't take emails, and will take a text, but it can't be more than 3 lines long. And so, okay, well, that's the way you pitch it. That's the way you'll get it, and so forth. So, yeah, it has changed. I mean, one, the media itself has changed dramatically. I mean, it used to be print, and now everything, and 90% of everything is online. So you don't really. What I find interesting about that, and that's a little aside here, is that when there's so limited number of printed magazines and even newspapers now, is that still something clients want? Do the young people, by young I mean the under 35 crowd,
Mhm.
who don't read magazines, who very seldom read a newspaper, I mean by a print newspaper, do they still care about something that's in print, And what we discovered was, yes, okay, there's still value. There's still something about being on the cover of Wired magazine that even if you're 22 and you're a hot shot out of Stanford, you want to be on the cover of Wired magazine. So there's still value in something that is actually not online every once in a while. But yeah, everything has changed dramatically in the last, I could say 5 years, but in the last 20 years, dramatically, it's changed. So pitches are made electronically, pitches are, and differently, but it's still, I know it sounds corny, it's still the media and it's still a story. And you interest that reporter or that editor or that producer by having a good story.
Is there an average time it takes to get a story covered? Like, say, for example, you pick up a new client today. I know there's nuances here, but is there like an average timeline to pick up a client 90 days later, we get coverage, or 6 months? I've seen a lot of clients that have had retainers and things like that, and no one ever quite knows, like, at what point in time is this working or not working? Is there a magic kind of like line in the sand?
Well, we've had both. We've had stories that where we couldn't wait to get out of the initial meeting because we knew that story was going to be so good and so interesting that we could have two or three reporters or two or three major media doing that story very quickly. But there are other stories that have, there are other mediums that have long, long lead times. And we had a story that took a year and a half from the time of the initial inception and pitch till this story happened. And that was on CBS Sunday Morning. CBS Sunday Morning, when they do one of those 20 to 30 minute segments, those take a long time in development. Oh, wow. And you spend a long time talking to that producer or series of producers, getting them the material, lining up the interviews, and so forth. So, I mean, yeah, certain things, it really, again, it depends on the medium that's going to do them the most good, do them what they need in order to reach their audience, but it's also the story itself. And if it's good enough, you can move fairly quickly on it. But it takes a long, and a lot of clients don't realize that it's a process. You know, it's a slog. It's not a race. It's not a 100-yard dash. And so a client hires you and they say, well, I'd sure like to be in the paper. I'd sure like to be wherever, on Wired Magazine or Cat Fancy Daily or on CNN next weekend. And you got to say, no, chances are, unless your story is breaking news, literally breaking news, that is going to crowd out other breaking news. And if it's topical enough, yeah, if you've got a product or a story that can be attached to ice, for example, then you're going to get a story pretty quick. Okay. But if it's your everyday mundane kind of story that's going to take some time to develop, then it's a slog, and we have to tell the clients that. You got to have patience. Now, when, like I said, my old company, when you were being paid only if you were successful, you can imagine it got a little scary, okay? When you work a year and a half on a story and then it finally runs, you've, in effect, lost a lot of money on that story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Man, does that make the client. And, you know, I know it sounds corny, but there's still satisfaction in this business when you've got a winner and when you've landed a great story and you can do high fives around the office and so forth. And you know your client's happy and you know your client's phone is going to ring. But I'll tell you another adage that goes with this business, and it's true. I've been in it long enough, I know it's true, that stories that are earned media stories client will do almost anything to get that story done and in the paper or on the news. Once it happens, it loses value unless you convince the client that how to use that content way beyond it. Mm-hmm. I've had clients that suddenly I'll say, I'm going to charge you $15,000 to get you into such and such a magazine, and that's what it's going to cost you when we get this story done, if we can get it in there. And they say, great, I'd pay 30. I said, no, it's only 50. And the story runs. I say, are you really going to send me a bill for $15,000 now?
I think that's across all the service-based businesses. I mean, we could talk for days about this. We've had clients before, kid you not. We've architected and engineered like a product launch, and we pushed them for 6 months to actually launch this product that they were reluctantly, like they didn't. I just don't know. And I'm like, your customers need this. Like this is gonna hit. So they reluctantly say, okay, right? We launch it. In 45 days, they have collected $500,000 and they're just like, well, whatever. Right. I'm like, if someone in my business came up with the idea and said, this is what your clients need, and engineered the whole thing, built the whole product launch, and then I had $500,000 in my bank account, I would be like, you're a client for life. I don't care if you do nothing else for the next 12 months. you've made me a mountain of money that my team internally did not think of and was not capable of doing.
Right.
It's an interesting landscape. I don't know. We've been around since 1998. Things have changed, so I don't know if it's just the dynamic of like the way the landscape is for entrepreneurs or business owners, but it seems like people like you and I that are skilled experts at our craft arguably is has less value. It doesn't mean that we don't deliver arguably even more value. It's an interesting thing, and I think maybe it's just overwhelm of options out there. I have no idea.
Well, and one of the things I've often said, again, about publicity and PR is that it's a slog to get a good story. It's not something that's going to happen instantaneously, except in rare cases. But it's also part of a contributed overall effect. If you get something like, one of the reasons I never would take a client that only wanted one story or one thing, because I knew they were going to be dissatisfied. Two, I knew it was going to be almost impossible to get that, okay, to do that way, and to be able to charge enough to handle that.
Yeah.
But what I try to tell them is that we're simply trying to get a little peace of mind of the client, of your customer. Overall, when you get two or three stories, when you get two or three good publicity stories, and they also see an ad or a billboard, or they also then run into an email campaign. Overall, that's when you're going to see your sales or your phone ring and see some dramatic effect over a period of time. But if you think one story is going to suddenly make you rich or your company $1 million in sales by a one story, even in the Wall Street Journal, highly unlikely.
Yeah.
But educating the client, believe me, that's also part of this business. And I'm sure you've gone through the same thing.
Yeah.
It's tough.
I'd argue that PR are the original storytellers of the world, right? In regards to the business landscape. In the last 7 years, storytelling, in quotes, has been a buzzword in the digital marketing world. There's people out there that do a pretty bad job of it, but the functions of it are the same, right? Like in PR, you got to find the story, you got to find the value, you got to find the hook, like what's the thing. And it's almost the same thing when you're developing it for marketing, for like, what's the call to action? What's the thing that's going to get them to take interest and then hopefully take action. As we're wrapping up today, are there three non-negotiables, or are there three like things that, I don't know if I want to call them pillars or foundational things that you always do when you're crafting a really good story? I know you've said that you do deep digging, but once you find something that's good, like how do you architect or how do you put that story together? Are there processes or pieces that have to fit together?
I'll go back to what I said before, because it's the foundation of everything that I've done and I've done through my companies, is that first of all, it has to be news. So the pillar we build everything around is the client. What is you can tell us what you're doing, you can tell us how you're doing it and so forth. We have to find the news value before we can do anything else. And then you build the story off of that news value. And that news value may come in different forms, as I mentioned. It may come in what you're doing, the product itself. It may come in or be embellished by how you do it. It may come in the data that's being spurned off of that can also build that story. And then by the time you are finished, you hopefully have a story that has a foundation of two or three good, solid news elements to it that then can be pitched to the media. And then the next step we always do, of course, is you're looking at the media themselves, the media that's going to do the client the most good in terms of reaching their audience that they want to reach. And then you start taking that pillar thing you have, and you have to make it adapted a little bit here and there for individual media or even individual reporter. And that's kind of where it is. I'm not sure that's exactly what you're referring to, but
No, that's good. Yeah.
The news, that's the pillar on everything else is hung in terms of if you're going to be successful in this business. And by the way, there are many, many PR firms that are successful that could give a damn, okay? they'll charge the fee regardless and get something out there, and they'll run you press releases. I was with a firm at one point in time that was making $1.1 million a year off of doing nothing but churning out press releases for a client. And I asked them at one point in time, do you get coverage? What difference does it make? You know, we're churning out the press releases. We're sending the bill to the client, you know. And eventually the client's going to fire you. And that's one of the things I often said is there are many reasons that a PR firm gets hired. There's invariably one reason they get fired. It's always the same, and that's no coverage. Okay?
Right.
You can say whatever you want to about all the other things, but that CEO or that head of marketing, ultimately they want to see some coverage, some positive coverage. And in today's world, they want those got coverage so they can use it as content for all their other marketing elements they're using.
Is there anything we missed that we should have asked you?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, ask me what I'm doing now.
Yeah. Well, what are you doing now?
Okay. Because I actually sold that PR firm last summer. And in the process of selling it, thank you very much. After 30 years of worrying about payroll.
Yeah, congratulations.
You worry about when you're a business owner. You know, I'd like to think that I spend all of my time worrying about storytelling and being creative. But you guys both know that what you do is you spend some of that time, but you spend an awful lot of time worrying about how you're going to keep the doors open, how to find new clients,
Yeah,
how to satisfy a client that's bitching at you for something or another, you know, and also how to make payroll every 2 weeks. And boy, that wears on you. After 30 some years, that can wear on you.
Yeah.
So I'm no longer doing that. Okay. What I am doing now is I've started a couple things, and I'm as I scream into my upper years, so to speak. I've formed a consultants company called Grove and Company, and I am consulting with clients, but not on a marketing plans and on creative things and events and things like that I've always done and always been a part of, including my history of being in the entertainment business for several years. So I love that. I can go in, I can consult with somebody, I can help them with their PR firm or with their marketing and give them ideas and so forth, but I don't have to be the person that executes it. What I've also got is with that company, I've built up so many resources over the years, as you probably imagine, that including the company that I sold my firm to, that can do those services. So I can recommend people to do the job. I can oversee it, make sure it's done right. I can give that gray-haired kind of touch to it and add that wisdom to it and so forth. And then the other fun thing I'm doing is I'm doing a podcast.
Awesome.
I've started a podcast, and it occurred to me,
Nice.
there was really no way of podcasting to people in their 70s and 80s that are still, what I say, out there doing amazing things and kicking ass and doing some really cool things. And yet every survey you see and so forth, when you check a box and it says your age, it goes as high as 74 plus, and that's it.
Yeah.
It's as if the plus don't count. Okay. I've built a podcast that's for the plus generation. So it's called Old People Rock. We just launched it this month, and we're lining up people that are pretty much both in the entertainment and the business world and in the arts that are doing some pretty cool things in their 70s, 80s, and in one case in their 90s, and being interviewed and talked to. And as I say in the podcast, it's not designed for people that want to grow old gracefully. I could care less about that. It's designed to acquaint people with who are inspiring in what they're doing now, and to say, you can still do it. Have fun, kick ass. So those are the two things I'm doing now.
I love it. I was just going to ask you, where can people find you? So, I mean, obviously you mentioned your podcast, which is amazing. I'm sure that's everywhere where podcasts can be downloaded and listened to. But if someone wants to hire you as a consultant, if someone wants to connect with you online, where would be a good place for them to go?
my URL, I have a website, Grove and Company. The website is, of course, www.grove-co.com. So it's grove-co.com. And you can reach me there. You can reach me on LinkedIn, of course, and reach me through the. We'll soon have a website, but our podcast is up and launched on Apple and Spotify and a few others, and it's called Old People Rock.
Love it. Dick, thank you so much for your time. We'll definitely have to have you back on, especially with the podcast. I'm sure you're going to have amazing stories. So thank you so much. It's been an honor.
Thank you. I appreciate you listening to me. And like I said, it's not hard to get an old guy to tell stories. So,
Yeah.
I got a million of them. Okay.
All right.
Okay. Thank you, guys.